is in a minute, but we'll sort that out in the background while we get started. So as I say, we'll begin here, and normally we begin with introductions of people that are either elected officials or people talking to represent elected officials. And then we could also hear from people that are either candidates who recently won elections to local offices or candidates who are running for election for the upcoming planning boards. And so anybody who wants to talk and have a minute or two here at the top of the meeting, if you want to raise your hand in the Zoom method of raising your hand, which varies depending on which version of Zoom you have, it'll either be in the reactions button at the bottom, and you click on that, and then there's an option to raise your hand, or on older versions of Zoom, you click on the participants button at the bottom, and then there'll be an option to raise your hand. And that's great. I see Mandy has her hand raised. And then Doug, I'm assuming you're going to raise your hand as well. And then I'm going to encourage Gary Gartner to raise his hand. And then we'll go in that order. That's good. And then if you can see my background or not, I'll put on a little video in the background just to give you a timer to know when time's going to run out or whatever. And we'll give as there's just
my name in too. No. Where did you put it?
Hey, Stuart, Nancy, I'm going to mute you.
You're there, and I'm.
Okay. I want to ask just everybody to stay on mute, while people are talking. And so, yeah, we'll give, there's just three people. We'll just give everybody a couple of minutes here at the beginning. So, Mandy, if you want to unmute yourself, and then go ahead.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to let every one of you know that the Peninsula Community Planning Board will hold their election on March 18th. Due to the pandemic, the city has allowed for ballots to be mailed in or dropped off at a ballot box. The location of the ballot box is to be determined. Mailed ballots must be received by 6 p.m. on March 18th. Any ballots that are received after that date and time, regardless of when postmarked, will not be counted. It is currently anticipated that the ballot drop box locations will be open and available on March 18th from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. And it is possible that they may also be available on March 17th. Further details will be available on the PCPB website when they become available. I would also like to announce that I am a candidate running for re-election for a second term on the Peninsula Community Planning Board. I've been a board member of the PCPB for 2 years and have utilized my position on the board to advocate for my community with regards to traffic safety issues, environmental justice, short-term vacation rentals, and the improvement of the parks located within our community. I love my community, and I have shown strong leadership when it comes to stepping up for Point Loma. It would be an honor and a privilege to continue to serve on the board. If I am reelected, I would like to expand community outreach by board members with the local community to ensure that the board is truly reflecting the values of the community that it serves. Additionally, I would like to ensure the responsible development of the peninsula for future generations, help keep our community and streets safe for families, and to continue to advocate for open space and parkland for the peninsula. I ask you or anyone you know who lives in the PCPB boundary to come out and vote. Again, you can check out the PCPB website at pcpb.net to get additional information. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. And then Doug, if you want to go next.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to participate in two Democratic clubs at the same time, one on my tablet, one on my laptop.
Oh, that's tricky.
Yes. Anyway, I'm Doug Case, and I represent Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. The legislature approved and the governor signed a $7.6 billion COVID-related stimulus relief package. This includes $2.3 billion for $600 payments to those with incomes under $30,000, and also to undocumented tax-paying households excluded from the federal relief. There is $2.1 billion in grants of up to $25,000 each for small businesses and nonprofits, and $400 million to provide stipends of $525 per child enrolled in state-subsidized childcare. An additional $2 billion in tax credits for small businesses receiving the Paycheck Protection Program loans is still under consideration in the legislature. Last week, the Safe and Open Schools Plan was introduced, which would send the state's most vulnerable students back to in-person instruction by mid-April, require county health departments to make COVID vaccines available on site to teachers and staff, and provide $6.5 billion to safely reopen schools and extend the instructional year. The Pro Tem recently made 2 local appointments. One of them, there is a statewide commission called the Healthy Californians for All Commission, which is studying strategies to achieve a single-payer healthcare delivery system in California. And she appointed Kara Desert, who is the CEO of San Diego's LGBT Community Center, to that one. And there also is a new reparations task force, which was proposed by Dr. Shirley Weber, and she appointed a council member, Monica Montgomery Stepp, to serve on that commission. So thank you very much for the time.
That's great, Doug. That was perfect. Juggling 2 clubs and you finished exactly on time. That's impressive. Yeah, and then let's see, Gary, Mr. Gartner. Yes, I think if you want to tell us about your recent election victory to the OB Town Council.
Okay. Yeah, so there was election held in early February, and there were 18 people. I guess they've never had that many run for the council at once, but 18 people ran for 8 seats. There were 6 incumbents who were elected and 2 non-incumbents, and I was lucky enough to be one of the 2 that got elected for the first time. Aaron Null, N-U-L-L, is the other non-incumbent, and he has a very impressive background. He started the Street Stewards program, STEWARDS, which encourages people to take care of their blocks to keep them clean. Started in OB, and it's now in 9 communities. So he's also on the board. So I'm excited to be a part of making Ocean Beach a better place, and they made me the liaison to local government advocacy to work with government leaders to try to advocate for the things that people want in our community. So I'm honored to serve and excited to join these great people. So if you have any items that come up or you want to come before the OB Town Council, just let me know. I'll put my number and email in the chat. And Mandy actually presented at the when we got sworn in by Chris Ward on Wednesday. She presented about the tree program that she's leads in the community to plant more trees. And it was very inspiring. So thanks.
No, excellent, Gary. And I see Becca, you have your hand up. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure do. So excited to announce I was reelected as our local Metro West area vice chair and as the chair pro tem. But what that means, and the reason I'm making the announcement, is that I'm the resolutions committee chair. So if you're interested in submitting a local resolution to the party, it's got to be under 400 words. It will have 3 whereases and a be it further resolved in another one. If you have any questions about that or how to submit a resolution, let me know, and I'm happy to help you hopefully get something passed. Cool.
That's great. Yeah, no, and congratulations to everybody. And then is there anybody else that, either candidates that have won something or running for something, or if you have any announcements that you'd like to make at the beginning of the meeting because you can't wait, if you have to drop off early and won't be here at the end. And if you are, do you want to raise your hand in either in the participants button or in the reactions button? Okay, Sonara, yes.
Well, I guess maybe I should make mine at the end because it was going to be about overturning Citizens United group here in San Diego. So since we're having a forum on that, I guess when people are all excited afterwards, we could better talk about what to do.
Okay, no, that makes good sense. Yeah, that does make good sense. Yeah, so it's relevant. But yeah, no, that's great.
I was too enthusiastic. I was ready.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Okay,
so,
great.
So, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So
So just checking.
I'll talk after the forum then.
Yeah, no, perfect. So anybody else that wants to give anything here? And if not, what I'll do is I'll hand back to Merrin, who'll go ahead and introduce our featured speakers for today.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Sorry, I'm on a call-in rather than on the internet.
Yeah, no, you sound great.
Okay, great. So our featured speakers for today are Amy Tobia, who many of you may know and have seen her speak about some other things at maybe some different clubs. She's always an awesome speaker, and Greg Coleridge, that are both going to be talking about different components. Hang on, that's my navigation. Both are going to be talking about different components of money and politics. So many of you may have got the newsletter where we speak to the vote about the recall at our last meeting. And one of the main reasons that proponents of the recall give for being in favor of the recall is that special interests should not have a seat at the table in decisions that affect community members. So there are lots of questions about that, like when people say money in politics, what does that mean? Our speakers here are here today to explain exactly what that means and what we can do about it. So do we have any, Amy or Greg, would either one of you like to go first? It was going to be kind of conversational, maybe like short talk, and then questions.
Go ahead, Amy.
All right, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, Amy, you sound great.
Yep.
Great. Okay. So since it was going to be very conversational, I prepared a couple of different sets of slides, and I'll save those till we start having questions. But I thought I'd just start by talking about two things that have to do with local politics and national politics. As soon as I turn off my phone here. Interesting, nobody ever calls me until I get on a call. So just for clarity and introduction, my name is Amy Tobia, and I am the local chapter leader for Represent Us San Diego. Represent Us is a national organization that is a nonpartisan organization that has been focused for the past 10 years on democracy reform. And our approach is that we need to get money out of politics. We need to end dark money, fix our elections, and create a more equitable way of funding our elections and getting people engaged in our elections. And so that work has been done by a lot of groups around the country for about a decade now. Potentially even longer. I know some of the people have been working in that space for about 20 years, trying to reform our election system because it really has been hijacked. In the 1970s and 1980s, they started making changes to the way some of the national laws ran. And then of course with Citizens United, which is something we're all pretty familiar with in terms of campaign finance, it's kind of gone off the rails. So nationally, Represent Us is really focused on awareness. They do a lot of great videos and a lot of team building around getting the idea of how we need to change the rules governing our elections to change the outcomes out into the public space. But Represent Us, like many policy activist organizations, would not succeed without their local city and state groups. And the reason is because we have different rules at different stages of how we elect our officials. So we have the national campaign finance rules, the city or the state campaign finance rules, county level and city level. And last month we did a talk on Campaign Finance 101 where we broke all that down and talked about the fact that when we talk about campaign finance reform, we all think a lot about the national, but in reality, the rules that govern our city elections and our county elections and our state elections aren't all the same as what governs our national elections. So one of the things that Represent Us is really focused on is going into individual cities and states and communities and looking at what needs to be done there in order to fix those elections, because the answer is not going to be the same depending on how the local governments are set up. The problems are going to be somewhat similar, but the legislation is going to be a little bit different. So one of the reasons that we work in that way is that we believe that if we do this over time, every other major social change in our country has happened when enough people have put enough pressure to cause that sea change. So when women first received the right to vote, when we finally had meaningful civil rights legislative change, when LGBTQ people were able to marry, like all of those different things happened when about 3.5% of the population of our country stood up and said, this is what we need to do. So the nonpartisan reform organizations like Represent Us, and there's dozens of them with similar mission, are really working to hit that number to create that sea change. And one of the really exciting things is, at least at the national level, we're getting really close. I think you all maybe have heard about legislation called HR 1, which is the For the People Act. And HR 1 is a law that would cover about 80% of another law called the American Anti-Corruption Act, which has been around for a number of years. Represent Us has been pushing for it. HR 1 would actually fix a lot of the problems with how our elections work. We saw that in the past 4 years, how many of the rules and norms were just thrown out the window. Those need to be codified. Around campaigns finance violations, around ethics rules, around presidential powers, those things that we took for granted, a lot of those are covered in HR 1. So right now, we're kind of at that tipping point, at least at the federal level, where if we are able to get HR 1 across the finish line and then can pursue a few additional pieces of legislation like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We also still need to work on overturning Citizens United. We also need to desperately reform our FEC. But if we can pass HR 1, we will be able to cut off gerrymandering and do a lot of other things that are really essential right now. If we don't, there's a lot of fear in the community that the rest of this work is never going to get done. Right now at the state level, 67 chambers across the country are controlled by Republicans, and it's a redistricting year. There is a strong fear in the reform community that if we don't get HR 1 passed in order to make gerrymandering illegal at the national level, we won't get another chance because the districts will be redrawn and we will spend the next 10 years in basically a minority rule in this country. So HR 1 mandates, among all of these other things, that gerrymandering is illegal. It also fights against the fact that people who want to run for office and win still largely are limited to who has money and time. And so it will provide public financing of elections and matching funds and democracy dollars and all sorts of fantastic things. So we're really excited about the HR 1, and I have some links if people are interested in that. But the reality is that would solve huge problems for us at the federal level. Then we have to do that same work at the state and the city level. And that's what I kind of wanted to share with everyone today is that the problems might be the same, but the laws to fix them are going to be very, very different. And so I'll pause there and we can talk a little bit more about it, and I can kind of go through how that translates to the city level when you guys are ready.
That was great. Thanks, Amy. And Greg, did you want to make introductory remarks or?
Sure. Well, greetings, everyone. I appreciate the invitation. I am on the East Coast, so it's already dark where I am and cold. And what little I know, given that I have a relative who passed now, an uncle from San Diego, it's always perfect temperature all year round. So I hearken. I don't know what it's like there today, but it's got to be better than what it is here. Anyway, appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you. And briefly, for those of you who may not be aware, I am with an outfit called Move to Amend, which is a national organization that got started the day of the passage of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision way back in January 2010. It's a coalition of what amounts now to about 500,000 individuals and hundreds of organizations that is focused on committed to having clean elections, not just that form, but just truly small d democratic, authentic democratic elections, authentic democracy, as well as social and economic justice, and a system that's genuinely accountable to the people and not corporate interests. We support a constitutional amendment. We focus largely at the federal level in promoting, and we have done for the past 10 years, something that we call the We the People Amendment, HJR 48, of what that's been the number the last 4 congressional sessions. We've not yet introduced it in the 117th Congress, waiting for that number 48 to appear. It has 2 provisions. One, to declare that only human beings have inalienable constitutional rights, not corporate entities. So it would abolish this notion of what some people call corporate personhood, as well as end the equally bizarre constitutional doctrine of political money in elections being akin or equal to First Amendment protected free speech. So it would overturn not just Citizens United, but preceding that by a couple of decades, the Buckley versus Vallejo 1976 Supreme Court decision, very first one that equated money with free speech. Toward that end, we've been around over the past now 11 years and have gotten several hundred organizations to endorse this We the People amendment, as well as 705 communities and states. 7 states have passed either ballot initiatives or resolutions, and the remainder at the local level, at the municipal level, county level, town, village level, have passed either municipal resolutions or citizen-driven ballot initiatives calling on Congress to pass this constitutional amendment, which we know is a heavy lift. So one of the provisions deals with money in politics. We're under no illusion in thinking that simply reversing Citizens United is going to create some sort of democratic nirvana that, quite frankly, we never had the day before Citizens United passed. I don't know about you, but I don't recall a real authentic democracy that occurred prior to that decision in which our voices were authentically heard, our needs authentically met, our communities authentically cared for, and our natural world authentically protected. So we've got a lot of work to do that precedes the Citizens United decision. A number of questions that were posed to me in terms of just understanding, and I guess maybe we can get into this more so concerning, and I won't necessarily define these now, but if people are interested in terms of what is a PAC versus a super PAC versus dark money, some of these things were in fact created or worsened through the Citizens United decision, but quite frankly preceded that decision. And even if we got rid of that, we still have this problem of this Buckley versus Vallejo decision that equates money as free speech. We believe, though, that even if we miraculously tomorrow morning were able to overturn Citizens United and even overturn Buckley versus Vallejo, there have been boatloads of other, and I think Amy mentioned the word hijack. That's a very apt descriptive term for how those super rich, and particularly those who have their finger on the control switch of corporate entities, have been able to steer public policy toward their interests, toward corporate interests, completely separated from money in politics, influencing public policy, steering public policy, threatening lawsuits, if not going to court, and overturn hundreds of democratically enacted laws protecting workers, consumers, the environment, shareholders, and the like, because of never intended inalienable constitutional rights that, quite frankly, have been captured or have been hijacked, that being constitutional amendments that from day one was intended for us, human beings, but have been redefined through the courts, being anointed, these corporate entities, with First, Fourth, Fifth, 14th Amendment, as well as usurping the contracts and the Commerce Clause, which we can get into if you're interested. So we feel that, yes, money in politics is certainly a problem, and no question, the HR 1 for the People Act would certainly help measures, particularly around voting rights, gerrymandering, and some of the other issues. But there is, if you drill down into that piece of the For the People Act that deals with money in politics, there's actually some concern that's been expressed by activists, those without a lot of money, that create this sort of partial matching feature of it, sort of a partial system of public financing. Those in the public financing sphere have said, you either got to do everything or you can't do anything. Because if you try to do a partial system like what exists in New York City and in some other places, if you get the numbers wrong, you're just magnifying the inequality and making it even more difficult for candidates without access to a lot of money to sort of be in the electoral ballgame. So we can get into that if you're interested. But we feel even if that piece of it was improved, yes, that certainly does help measures, but there's concern that provisions of the For the People Act could be challenged in court and overturned. Because again, what the powers to be and what corporate entities lean on and have at their disposal, that's their, no pun intended, ultimate trump card, is these never intended constitutional rights that give money, free speech, First Amendment rights, and corporate entities rights. to be involved in elections, as well as a whole lot more. So I'll just end it there by saying, we feel that there needs to be sort of an effort at dealing with things at a local level, at a state level, and certainly a lot historically has been mentioned. A lot of great experimentation has gone on, but ultimately, unless we change the fundamental ground rules at the federal level, then we sort of operate in a box, and that box is constrained in every direction by what the federal, whether it's election law or any other kind of law, by what the Constitution says and federal laws. And the ultimate decision maker is the Constitution. So unless we figure out ways to widen the parameters of that box, we're stuck. And it seems like every year or two, there are statutes passed or new constitutional passed that narrow the size of that box to where we have fewer and fewer places to go within it to do what we feel needs to be done at the local, state, and even federal level. So I'll stop there.
That's great. Thank you, Greg. And then I'm just going to check because Merrin is on the phone. Merrin, do you want to jump in and decide how you want to take it? Yeah, next steps.
Sure. So I would say anybody that has any questions, you can go ahead and just jump in with questions for either. And I think that'll be the easiest way to work it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So if you have if you have a question for Amy or Greg or both, if you can raise your Zoom hand, which is either from the participants tab, there's a little on older versions of Zoom, or on the newer versions from the reactions button. So we got a couple of questions. Yeah. So we'll go. Yeah, Kip, if you want to go first.
Hey, Amy, this question's for you. Thanks for being with us today. I was wondering how the different legislative approaches changed. Is it due to the city structure, or is it due to the existing election laws? What's the most common ways in which your legislative approaches change per jurisdiction?
Sure. If you're talking about comparing San Diego to other places where Represent Us is active, is that what you're talking about? Like what's different around elections, or between San Diego and the state and the federal?
I think between San Diego and other similar jurisdictions, because you mentioned that problems are the same, but varying laws, even among similar places, always affect the legislative approach.
So one great example of that is here in San Diego. If we decide that we want to make a change to our charter, our city charter, we can do a ballot initiative. We can gather signatures and petition our government to make a change. In 26 states across the country, that is not an option at either the city or the state level. So if I was a citizen of one of those states, I would only have the ability to petition to change election law by convincing already elected individuals to make that happen. And you can imagine how exhausting of a process that could be. And in some states, it's just not even possible. Another thing that really varies is how good the local ethics board is, or whether or not there even is one. In San Diego, one of the byproducts of the fact that we have had a number of corruption scandals, unfortunately, over the history of our city, is that we actually have a relatively decent ethics commission compared to most other cities our size that does pay attention to and catch people and fine people for not following the rules. Now, we may not agree that the rules are strict enough, but at least we have somebody in place who's actually watching and paying attention. In other municipalities, you don't necessarily have that opportunity. And one other quick thing that comes to mind that also varies is the ability to implement change. For example, if we wanted to do something like ranked choice voting in our city, because we're a charter city in the state of California, we can. However, many states have a prohibition on changing the way that you run your elections outside of what the state allows. If we were not in a charter city, we would not be allowed to vote. Even if we decided to vote for it and everybody voted it and wanted it to happen, we would not even be allowed to hold that vote in our city because Newsom, or the previous governor, it was either Newsom or the previous governor, overrode the law that would allow that to be an option. Not mandate it, but just even allow it. And a number of states are like that, where there are overriding state laws prohibiting election reform at the state level that are imposed upon the cities. So that's why it becomes a little bit of a challenge to implement at the state and city level some of these changes because their individual city charters and state laws are also different.
Thank you.
That's great. No, thanks, Kip, for the question. Next up is Angela.
Hi. I would like to learn more about what is happening with Represent Us in San Diego. You had indicated that you might talk to us about that, but I'm not sure if that's the right place to do it now or not.
Yeah, I can do a quick overview. And my maiden name is Hawkins. So whenever I see that pop up, I have to say that. So Represent Us, our local chapter has a number of things that we are working on and a couple of things we'd like to add to our plate. And I will say we are an overly ambitious chapter. I sit as the chapter liaison for the National Association of Nonpartisan Political Reformers. I'm the proxy for Represent Us sitting on those board meetings. And so I hear about what all these other groups are doing. And I think we're a pretty ambitious local chapter. So I have to kind of brag on us a little bit for that. We are really looking at, can we target over the next 4 to 8 years, making transformation at all parts of our local election process to make sure that we can create a really politically engaged community where that is a shared value, not something to run away from. We want to provide everyone the opportunity to be engaged in our local process. We want to make sure the system allows the voters to be at the center of that process and to have the first and the final say, because that's really what this is all about. It's not about anything but being voter centered in everything that you do. So of course, starting off with public financing, we are in the process of reaching out and starting the process of building up that coalition a little bit more. We had tabled it a little bit last year because of COVID. We didn't have the ability to do a lot of coalition building. Common Cause has come in with some additional help, and they're helping us with some tools for that. We're going to be going out to groups and kind of workshopping our current proposal for democracy dollars, because that really speaks a lot to the access, to the empowerment, and to the voter engagement piece. So if we can get the Voters Voice Initiative going again and be able to put some legislation on the ballot that would allow us to have public financing through democracy dollars, the results that they're having in Seattle continue to be astronomical, with significant increases from like 8,000 people who are donating campaigns to 28,000 to 38,000. So in 4 years, their voter participation went from 8,000 to 38,000 in terms of campaign donors. So we're really excited about the public financing because of what that does to access, right? More different people being able to run for office. The other thing that public financing campaign has in it is the ability to televise and mandate debates, because we feel that people need more opportunity to get to know the candidates, and that it's really part of the election system should be to create those opportunities so that certain candidates aren't necessarily disadvantaged right out of the gate. So that would be another part of it. The Voters Voice Initiative also has a campaign finance dashboard. We have actually got that live, at least for the mayoral candidates, because one of the biggest things that we can do is to use the data that's available to us and create more transparency in our elections. If I can't see everybody's hands, but if I ask every single one of you how much money the candidate who won in your district raised last cycle, would you be able to answer that question for me? Then if I asked you, what does your current city council member, how did they vote for the past 4 years if they've been in office for 4 years? You probably wouldn't be able to answer that very specifically, because even though we collect a lot of data because of our disclosure laws, we don't share it in any sort of meaningful way. So we've actually built, and I'll put a link in the chat, it's not fully functional yet, it's getting really far along, a dashboard to share that kind of information, because we think it's important that in 5 minutes you should be able to understand a lot more about people running for office and where the money is flowing. We also want to add to that a candidate dashboard for more accountability. Then the idea of this 4 or 5 forward, so we're not kneecapping viable candidates at 2 in the primary, that we have more people going forward. That speaks to voter engagement. We're really disengaging a lot of people between the primary and the general because their favorite candidate doesn't make it very far. And then of course the ranking process to push forward with more choice for ranking in the general election. Ranking speaks to accountability. It speaks to that idea that I shouldn't have to choose between what my values are and voting against them, right? This either or scenario. It also speaks a lot to voter engagement and empowerment. One of the things that they've been talking about, if you've heard about in Alaska, is now that they have ranked choice voting with open primaries and top 4, it changes the nature of those Senate elections, because there is the ability for that official, that senator, to vote what she knows the people want her to do and not be worrying about a party primary. So that is an interesting example, but that's the kind of accountability that we want to put in. We want the people who are elected to first and foremost get their funding from the people who are voting for them, which should be all of us, not just the 0.4% of people who donated in San Diego's campaigns for mayor this year, but all of us should be able to donate and contribute. And then we also want to make sure that when we want to vote them out, we can, that there is a process for that. And ranked choice voting increases accountability at the ballot box. So those are all the things that we are working on. And a lot of that has to do with just education and outreach and coalition building. And it's a lot. And right now we're investigating adding another piece to it, which would be campaign finance reform, a very specific type of campaign finance reform that's been successful in Oregon and Washington and Alaska, where they go in and legislate. They just make it really hard for people to donate by requiring more disclosure of where the money's coming from. So if you can't prove that your company doesn't have a certain number of shareholders that are overseas based, you can't donate. And a lot of companies actually will give up on trying to prove that they don't have those donors because it's just too hard. And so I'll stop there, but those are kind of all the things that we're trying to work on for San Diego. And I know it's a lot, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Amy. And then next we have Mark. You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I have a question for Amy. You talked about HR 1 as being critical to pass. How likely is that to happen with this Congress? And part 2 of that, are we going to have to get rid of the filibuster in order for that to get through the Senate? 2-part
question. We will have to get rid of the filibuster to get it through the Senate, is my current belief. That could change, but right now that's what everybody is saying, that is the case. I don't know, Greg might know a little bit more about that, but in terms of HR 1 passing, he's absolutely right. There are some things about it that I don't care for around how it changes limits for public financing and things of that nature at the federal level. But again, the restrictions that it places on presidential powers, the increases, or the changes that it makes to the judicial system, the voting rights changes that it makes, which doesn't go quite far enough without the John Lewis Act, as I said, but is still very helpful. And of course, the anti-gerrymandering piece, which is absolutely essential right now, and potentially one of the biggest and most important things we could do this year. Because again, countries don't survive with minority rule for very long. And if we aren't able to stop that type of gerrymandering from happening, I don't know that we'll get another chance. So while I don't care for a few of the things that are in that policy, it does make disclosure better. I mean, it does enough good things that I think we have to go forward in light of the current system, and then just keep fighting for more change. I hope it passes. Everything I hear is that it's more likely to pass than to not, but I've still got my fingers crossed.
And Greg, did you want to address the issue about the filibuster?
Well, I think Amy is correct that probably without getting rid of the filibuster, it's going to have, well, it may have a difficult time regardless. I mean, after all, we saw in this past election an incredible amount of money being spent by states, many of them in a losing cause. I think 9 out of the 10 largest senatorial campaigns measured in terms of dollars spent was in 2020. The one exception being in 2018. And that includes, the elections in Georgia and so many, South Carolina and all. And some of those candidates lost and they spent just historic amounts of money. So those who won, of course, money is the mother's of elections. And whereas because of gerrymandering, it's somewhat, how's this for a strange oddity? But because of gerrymandering in so many safe districts, and now the Democrats are in control, it's almost easier to get issues around money in politics through the House because you have so many quote unquote safe districts. But when it comes to the Senate, you run statewide. You can't gerrymander state. The only way, therefore, candidates feel they can win is they got to win the monetary arms race. And so that's where, the problems come in. Concerning the For the People Act, I would love to see the money politics piece of it just being taken out and dealt with separately. I don't know if that's possible, but if you are in any kind of position to be your representative or senators about it, given what's out and what's known, and I can, forward afterwards, I have to dig up a good link that speaks to some of the problems associated with the campaign financing part of the For the People Act. That's certainly the position that I'm taking.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Greg. And then next we have Sonara.
Hi, everyone. Well, first, I just wanted to say, HR 1, why it's so critically important right now is you're seeing in all these states, the Republicans trying to roll back voting rights by narrowing the number of early voting days, by not allowing no faults or no reason vote by mail. And HR 1 will get rid of all of these laws that they're trying to pass right now for voter suppression. So right now they want to make Arizona a state that no longer is going to have vote by mail, even though that's worked successfully for 20 years. They're trying to take away vote by mail in Georgia and in Florida. And HR 1 mandates a national system. And it means that everyone everywhere gets to vote by law. And it means that everyone everywhere gets to have early voting. And that no one anywhere has to have, crazy ID requirements. One of the laws in Georgia is looking to put both a notary has to sign your early vote by mail, and you have to have a copy of your ID. That's ridiculous to turn in your ballot. So I'm super in favor of HR 1 for all those reasons. I just quickly wanted to show everybody something because one thing that kind of annoyed me this year was after the election, everyone said, oh, California isn't as progressive as we thought it was. California really isn't all that progressive because look at the initiatives that they passed this year. So I have this site where I catalog all the mailers I get from all the initiatives. These are all the mailers that I and people that volunteered with me received for Prop 22. So other people in the community also contributed the flyers that they received. But I received all but one of these, all but one of them. So, sí a la Prop 22, that was to my husband. Vote sí a la Proposición 22, that was to my husband. This other one, this one was a mailer that also says yes on Prop 22. Prop 22, if you remember, allows Uber to continue keeping their drivers as independent contractors. This one in Korean for our Korean roommate. This one in Korean for our Korean roommate. This one, you can't see it here, but it was huge. This was a foot by a foot. This one from Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who apparently thinks it's okay not to pay people living wage for Uber. We got a total of 1 flyer against Prop 22. So if you ask why Prop 22 passed, this is why. And who was behind all these flyers, 100% of these yes on Prop 22 flyers that were sent? Coming down here, and look how long they are. They're not one page, they're multiple pages. These propaganda pieces were sent by Protect app-based drivers and services, sponsored by Uber, Lyft, DoorDash. So these are literally companies buying their own exception, right? And that's not the only one I have to show. I'm sorry if this is interesting to you, it is to me. I have a few more examples. This is Prop 19. Prop 19 passed in California. These were all the pieces that were received on Prop 19. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them. And every single one of them was yes on Prop 19. It was sponsored by Coalition of Firefighters, Realtors, Seniors, Disabled Homeowners, and Wildlife Victims. But the principal sponsor was the California Association of Realtors and the Professional Firefighters. So that's a lot of mail. And because they were able to send all that mail, Prop 19 passed. Now, I don't have a negative perception of Prop 19. Honestly, I don't know enough about it to say even whether it's a good or bad thing that it passed. But I do know that Prop 15 was something I really wanted to pass. Prop 15 would allow our commercial properties to have their property tax raised instead of having it held steady for commercial properties only. This would have contributed a lot to our schools, and it failed. So once again, people said that California is not a liberal state. But look at this. This is all the mail that we received against Prop 15 in our neighborhood. There was this slate mailer against Prop 15. There was this against Prop 15, this against Prop 15, this against Prop 15, this, and these all came from the same committee. And who was against Prop 15? Who sent all these flyers to all these citizens, to all these voters all over the state of California? It was the No on Prop 15 campaign, sponsored by the California Business Roundtable, the California Business Properties Association, and Boston Properties. So Boston Properties isn't even an association. They're just like Uber and Lyft. They're a company who didn't want Prop 15 because they manage commercial properties. So they sent all these flyers and Prop 15 failed. So it's not fair to say that California voters aren't liberal. We are completely bombarded with mail from a single perspective. How are we supposed to know the difference if we see so many mailers coming at us that say the same thing and none that tell us the true story? And the last one I want to pull up is it's not just issue campaigns. And Measure E is another one. Unfortunately, I don't have Measure E here documented because that was during the primary and they didn't do as many. But this is the candidate Tasha Borner-Horvath. And Tasha Borner-Horvath is an assembly candidate. She's a Democrat in North San Diego County. And I have nothing against Tasha Borner-Horvath as a person. But I found what was sent in her campaign to be pretty interesting. So I unfortunately moved away. Now I have to type this back here. Tasha Borner-Horvath. All these flyers were sent in her race. Not a single one was sent against her. Every flyer sent was for her. And if you look at what was sent, only this one was sent by her campaign. The rest of them, who were they sent by? So I'm going to look at this one. This one is sent by the healthcare companies. It says Tasha Borner-Horvath was created by Californians for high quality and affordable healthcare, sponsored by Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield of California. Now, I'm going to guess that Blue Shield in California and Anthem Blue Cross don't actually want affordable healthcare. They don't want Medicare for all. And they're funding Tasha's race. So how is that going to influence Tasha when she votes? Right? So they sent one flyer on her behalf. The rest of them were sent by the California Democratic Party. And that's even more problematic because the California Democratic Party didn't decide to make Tasha Borner-Horvath's race a priority. No, no, no. Somebody gave money through the California Democratic Party, and we have no way of knowing who that person is. And it was funneled into mail for Tasha Borner-Horvath. Now, we don't know who gave that money to Tasha Borner-Horvath's campaign because it went through the California Democratic Party. But I bet Tasha does. Was it the healthcare companies again? What other commercial interest was it? We don't know. So I apologize. I know I ran a little bit long, but I just wanted people to see that because that's the influence that money has in our elections and has today here locally and everywhere else. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Sonara. And don't apologize because I did chatting you. I did say, yeah, go ahead and show those now because I think illustrating that, you know, and everybody can relate to those particular propositions last time makes it a little easier for everybody to understand. So thank you. And thank you for that resource you have with all those flyers that you keep and share with everybody. Yep. So next up we have Gary Gartner, if you want to go ahead.
That was amazing, Sonara. Really. I didn't know you catalog everything. My stepsister's trying to get me to take boxes of campaign brochures that I save and scan them like you've done. So I'll have to tell her that I saw how it's done.
I'll take them. I'll take them. I take them from, I crowdsource it. So go for it.
Okay, I've got a lot in Northern California I'll bring down. But you're exactly correct because, you know, we're Democrats. We support the Democratic Party and everything else. But the problem with the Democratic Party is that the leaders don't want to change the system. So what happens is you have quote unquote progressive Democrats like Tasha or Scott Wiener in San Francisco or whoever, and they get money from oil companies, they get money from other people they don't want to show, but it's all cleaned up, or there's a term for it. What's it, Sonara? When it's put through the party, there's a term for it. It's not laundered.
Laundered?
It's not really laundered, but it's put through the party for a reason, and there's a name for it. I don't know if Amy knows the name.
Sanitized.
Yeah, and it's not a good thing. I wanted to say on the local level, so Amy, John Hartley, has he connected with Represent Us?
He is not. He was part of the Voters' Voice Initiative's first couple of meetings, but the coalition, including Common Cause and a lot of those other groups, decided that Democracy Dollars was the approach we wanted to take. And so we have not been collaborating since then. Yeah.
Okay,
but I know him.
It's a different approach than public financing.
No, it is. Yeah, it is public financing, but
Okay.
it's public financing with Democracy Dollars like Seattle does. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess he's worked on public financing of city council and local races for a long time, and shared recently that certain people that are on the council, including the current council president, said that they were in favor and then actually voted against public financing of campaigns and were hostile about it.
So we were pursuing our public financing initiative because I think this speaks a lot to what Sonara was just presenting, right? I think it's unrealistic for us to think that we are going to be able to change these campaign finance laws by hoping that we elect people under the current rules that will just do it, because they got elected under the current rules. And everything that we're proposing is going to recenter power to the voters and make it more likely that they'll be held accountable and that they'll be in competitive races. For example, I mean, our state assembly races are some of the least competitive thing that you've ever seen across the country. And so I do believe that in order to make these changes, we're probably going to end up with a ballot initiative process. And part of the reason, as you just mentioned, is, we were working with city council for a couple of years trying to get enough support for for public financing of elections. And everybody always comes back, is like, well, we can't pay for it. We have to pay for a library. I call these people democracy butts. They're all about making democracy better, but when it affects their ability to run, they run the other direction. And so it's really going to take the community and probably a ballot initiative just standing up and saying, we are changing these rules because they don't benefit you, the candidates and our representatives either. When we require people to go out and do this massive amount of fundraising in order to compete for office and don't create a level playing field, of course, we're going to get people who go do that and become very good at it and become beholden. When we allow things like behest to be legal, we allow this to happen, we're going to have to stand up and make it stop. So with public financing, I agree. We felt like we had a few supporters in city council candidates, but a lot of the people who supported it kind of waffled, which is why we decided to make a run for ranked choice voting instead. But I think it's going to take a ballot initiative because it's really hard to get people to vote for something that's good for voters that's not good for the candidates.
Agreed.
If I might, the very good display of documents in our, I don't know if you're on or not, but just wanted to highlight a couple of those right at the very end. The ones you showed of the candidates, whatever her name was, the camp that were not from her campaign, the 3 or 4 mailers. And what surprised me actually about the one you showed was that it had actual organizations, real organizations that are behind it. Because of course, one of the problems we're seeing more and more over the last number of years are these what are called dark money organizations, 501c4, that for tax purposes are considered to be social welfare organizations, that wealthy individuals or corporate entities that don't want the blowback that comes from donating one way or the other to a candidate or to a issue campaign, because, activist people now are becoming more active in either boycotting or supporting organizations, corporations, businesses that support either who they like or who they don't like. So one way around that is to donate or invest politically in these 501c4 organizations. And you're just seeing an onslaught of them, and it's an end run. Is it not? An end run around having to disclose, because social welfare organizations are not legally have to disclose the sources of their funds. So they're be from wealthy individuals, corporations, they could be foreign corporations. We just simply don't know. And we're seeing more and more of these what are called super PACs that were created prior to Citizens United that are not bound as a traditional political action committee is to limitations on the amount of money to be spent or what they can be spent on. So these are the sources of the funds for all the attack ads that we saw. And it makes it the presence of super PACs and the presence of dark money organizations combined makes it awfully difficult to be successful at trying to get a handle around limitations of campaign financing at the local level that oftentimes is focused exclusively on candidates, how much money a candidate can raise, because you can't go after these independent expenditures or these other organizations because to do so violates Buckley versus Vallejo. So that is the loophole, the gigantic loophole that you can drive a Mack truck through, which is, it just makes it challenging to try to fundamentally try to accomplish anything meaningfully at a local or even a state level, or even at a federal level, because constitutionally, they've got this bedrock, this fallback that allows them to skirt campaign finance limits.
One of the things I'm sorry, I was just going to say, Greg, is one of the things that I wanted to point out is in California, we actually have passed what's called the Disclose Act. And as troubling as those propaganda pieces were, we have access to the knowledge of at least those groups who funded it. And they recently tightened that law. And now the major donors, actually individual names have to be disclosed for those mailer pieces going forward. And in fact, one of the other components of HR1 is that any person who donates more than $10,000 to a group at the national level would have to be identified. So it really strikes at that idea of awareness. But again, then we have to have sites like SNARA's and make people aware of it. But mandating disclosure is one way to try and get a cap on that. So, but that's a California thing that's a little bit unusual. Not very many states have that law.
Yeah, no, thanks, Amy. And it took a long time to get that law passed. But yeah, Laurie Saldana, if you want to go next.
Thank you. This is such an important discussion. And I just wanted to point out that the money flows the other way too, in the sense that candidates will raise funds. And most recently, we've seen them take tens of thousands of dollars from law enforcement organizations, and then they put that into the state Democratic Party. And it's essentially laundering this police money that is then used to, for various candidate support and other operational expenses. So it's not just these special interests supporting candidates or causes and propositions directly. It's also money going to a candidate's campaign coffers. They don't need that money, or they raise a lot of it just to pass on to others. So it gets very difficult to track where this is going. And we see that here in San Diego. We see the Deputy Sheriff's Association, not too far away. We see Los Angeles police officers. A lot of money from those groups is going into local candidates' campaigns. And then instead of being used, it goes right to the state Democratic Party. And unless you know how to track those financial disclosures, you're never really aware of how much of that money is in fact being blue washed, if you want to call it that way.
I would just want to second what Lori just said about that. I mean, I've been on the state assembly site and found candidates who are donating $4,999, because that's at 5,000, there's a cutoff, to other candidates. So if somebody was running for office and I give them my $10, they decide to give that $10 to somebody in another assembly district. And that's legal, it's allowed, but that's why we have to look at our rules. We can't expect candidates to follow abstract rules that we haven't made up yet. We need to look at them and see where they're allowing things to happen that make us uncomfortable, unhappy, that seem to go against a truly representative democracy. And then we need to push for them. And in all honesty, it's going to be a hard push because we're going to be forcing people to change the way that they've been elected. But like you said, it goes back to transparency. I might really quickly here show this project because I'm really proud of it, even though it's not quite done. I think you all know how hard it is to to build a website, let alone a website that takes horrible, horrible databases and tries to make something usable of them. But we are getting close. And if we could get a few more volunteers and a little bit more money, we might be able to get this ready before our next election. So this is something that Voters Voice has been working on with Open San Diego for a couple of years. And when I commented to you on if you knew how much had been raised in one of the recent elections and nobody could answer, it's really hard to get that information. In spite of our great disclosure laws, our city and our county do a horrible job of creating awareness around what people are running and how they're spending it. So we've built this. It's not fully functional yet. We're getting there. The mayoral candidates are current through the last, I want to say through the end of January. So I think we're missing a report. But what we're trying to do is create an opportunity for people to very quickly get an understanding of how much was raised, how much was spent. We want to have all of these have sub features, sort of like an Open Secrets for San Diego, where you can go in and see in more detail the flow of money, what the money is being spent on. Is it all mailers? Is it all legal fees? Is it all employees? Is it being donated to other people? And also see, the number of donors. Is the money coming from inside or outside the city? In other cities, they have dashboards like this. This is normal. I found out, for example, in one of the Seattle elections, they had a city council candidate receive 40% of their funding from outside the state for their city council race. Strange thing to have happen, but I found it out in about 2 seconds by clicking on a dashboard like this. And so I think if we had information like this, in addition to having information about how people voted, it would be a lot easier for us to kind of track where the money is going and hold people accountable. So, so again, this is just an example. Like I said, we're getting close to functionality, but it's taken a lot of people, a lot of time. These things I think are important. Number of donors, how much is raised, and then we want to add on here also the number of votes, because right now, if you wanted any of this information, you'd go to 9 different places to find it. So I thought I would share that as one of our efforts. That's all volunteer built, by the way.
Yeah,
Well
no, thanks, Amy. Yeah, no, that is quite a wonderful thing. Because, yeah, the ballotbook.com, I know, does something kind of similar, but you have to pay like $30 a month to subscribe to it. Whereas this is, you're making it freely available to everybody.
Yeah, I think it should be. It should be free, and it also should be very self-tabulating. You shouldn't have to download individual things and then do a lot of math, which is what we all have to do now. So.
Right. Of PDF files that are not meant to be easily transported.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. I think I've just got an eye. I'm cognizant of the time, and Maren, you're on a phone. Did we want to give Amy and Greg a chance to kind of wrap up and maybe do an ask for us specifically for a club, or specifically any interest we might have in how much money gets spent in a District 2 race and who contributes to a District 2 council member, and then which way do they tend to vote on specific issues that might have been on the ballot recently or might be upcoming issues at the City Hall, something like that. And Maren, you're on mute. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do it then with Maren not unmuting. So if we want to wrap up, maybe Greg, I know you're on the East Coast. If you want to go first and just give us, if you like, what you would ask for us as a local Democratic club here in San Diego. What are the kind of things that we should be focused on and working on here in 21? And then I'll ask Amy the same. And I thank everybody for their questions. And then we'll wrap up here.
Before doing so, could I ask all of you a question, which is
Yes.
In terms of in San Diego, as well as other municipalities in California, how much of a emphasis or trend is there to have local laws being preempted by the state legislature over any number of issues, or is it any issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly have an opinion on that, but I'll let other people go first if anybody wants to raise a hand and address Greg's question. Yep, Laurie.
I would say, in my experience, it's more the federal government. We've seen a lot of local land use decisions go all the way to the White House. because so much of our local land, and District 2 knows this, is under Department of Defense and federal control. We're still a big military community. So in my experience, even when I was at the state legislature, there was more of a tendency for the power brokers in San Diego to go straight to Washington to get what they wanted. And of course, that was when we didn't have as many Democrats in Washington representing San Diego region. So that's been more of how things are overridden at the local level, is through direct federal engagement.
That's good. Anybody else like to add?
I would add on to that, like housing. I've seen a lot of bills come out of the state regarding housing and the requirements for that. You know, there's a big bill to densify under the guise of affordable housing. But again, a lot of that is, you know, changing the regulations of how that gets approved through the local planning boards or the planning departments.
I appreciate. Anybody else? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, there's no hands raised.
Okay. Well, the reason I ask is because that is a big issue in my part of the world and many other states around the country, with municipalities, democratically enacted laws passed by city councils, or initially suggested by mayors and then passed by councils, regarding environmental concerns, gun safety, use of plastic bags, any fracking, oil and gas drilling, just a whole host of issues that get preempted at the state level from the local level. And Amy mentioned before about charter communities, that the charter or the home rule allows communities at a local to sort of make their own decisions, so long as they don't violate state law. And that certainly is important. It's doing democracy directly. And I bring that up because, whereas the topic for this evening is all about trying to increase democracy through democratizing the money in elections, to make it more equal, to make sure that money is not a megaphone, to provide some sort of alternatives, whether it's reducing the amount that's coming from well-to-do people and corporate entities, or giving a voucher, or creating clean money, full public financing, or partial public financing. I mean, there's a whole load of different approaches out there. But the overriding or undergirding concern is that of democracy. And we are seeing that if solely and exclusively we focus on the money in elections piece and don't deal with some of these other concerns, whether it's gerrymandering, whether it's other ways of voting, ranked choice voting, or concerns related to the other piece of our We the People amendment, which is trying to reduce and eliminate corporate constitutional rights, the rights that have allowed local laws to be preempted at the state level, or state laws to be preempted at the federal level by either legislatures or courts, that we're just simply not going to get where we want to go. That while it's important to focus on money in elections, that simply is insufficient in of itself. So that it's important to sort of look at this holistically. Obviously, we can't do everything all at once, but nevertheless, these issues are interconnected. And it's just awfully difficult to sort of parse out one piece of this and somehow think that we're going to achieve a lot without addressing some of the other interrelated concerns. So all of that by way of saying that we feel at Move to Amend that small problems require small solutions. Let's face it. Medium problems, medium solutions. Major problems, major solutions. We have a democracy crisis, my friends, in this country that transcends any one politician, any one political party, any one election, even money in politics. It's fundamental. And as Amy mentioned before, you can't have minority rule in this country. And we have had minority rule for a very long time. It's gotten a lot worse, but it certainly is something that predates Citizens United, predates the explosion of money in politics, even through the Buckley versus Vallejo. And so we feel that somehow we got to get a handle on this fact that we have never authentically had a functioning, authentic democracy basically ever in this country. And one of the main impediments to that, beyond money in politics, is the fact that the well-to-do in this country have used the corporate form to rule, to govern, to preempt local decisions and preempt people who represent their constituents through hijacking constitutional amendments. So I would just simply add that it's not either or. Doing the work that you all are talking about doing there in the city or the county is important, but that a piece of the work that needs to happen beyond the micro level is at the macro level. And that macro level is, and I put in the chat, to do what can be done to focus on helping this nationwide movement of passing the We the People Amendment. Sonara is working with us to approach your respective public officials, federal congresspersons, to invite them to endorse, to become a co-sponsor, if they already are not, of this We the People Amendment, to join the 75 co-sponsors in the last session. We're trying to get it to 100 in the current congressional session. So I invite you to go to the website, movetoamend.org, check out this campaign of ours called the 117th Congressional Campaign to move Congress to amend, and figure out how we can sort of do both, focusing on the local level, but understanding the limitations of it, and thereby the need to at least spend some bit of time to try to change the fundamental ground rules at the federal level. Because I'll just simply add, many people feel that our government is broken. It's not broken, it's fixed, as in rigged. And it's been that way for a very long time and will never, ever change unless we change the fundamental ground rules, which includes not just changing faces, public officials, not just changing laws, which are statutes, but changing ground rules. And that's the Constitution. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. And then Amy, do you want to wrap up?
Sure. I mean, Greg very eloquently stated almost verbatim, other than we're going at it from a different path, what Represent Us is seeking to accomplish, which is to unrig our current system of elections in order to make sure that we finally can have a representative democracy. We've never really had one. It's always excluded people since its foundation. And so, but if we are willing to put in the work and put in the time and really focus on fairness and voter inclusion and really think about changing the nature of our relationship between us voters and our elected officials and changing the ground rules, then maybe we could eventually have a truly representative democracy. Our local political process is a great place to start because it's an opportunity to have we're still small enough. It's an opportunity to have meaningful conversations with our elected officials. And if you think about what the purpose of election is, we go about it all wrong. And only because we've done it for so long do we go about it all wrong, right? We have a city budget of $4-point-something billion. And yet in order to be responsible for representing us, we make people run this money gamut where they spend all this time fundraising instead of spending time in the community, getting to know everyone and listening to their constituents. And then when they get in office and they don't do what we expect of them, we're surprised. We shouldn't be surprised because the whole time they were running, they were getting to know not necessarily the voters. You need the voters for votes, but to run again or to run for higher office, they need the support of the people who funded their campaign. And I think that's really something we need to take a look at, and public financing would open ourselves up to the opportunity to have a different type of person running for office and for us to have more say in who crosses the threshold onto that ticket. right? Because that's the primary before the primary, is who has enough money to even take a stab at this. So I think it's really important we go back to and look at the very beginning, and we think about what a campaign should look like, and what should be expected of those candidates. And then when they're in office, how we can track what they're voting on and track what they're doing and track where the money is. There's just not enough accountability. People like Sonara building those fantastic websites and me doing spreadsheets on the weekend, that's not how our democracy should work. We have the technology. We live in a very developed city, but we keep all this information hidden. And the lack of transparency around campaign finance and around who's spending what on whom creates so much mistrust that even candidates who do a good job and listen to their constituents and aren't necessarily being swayed by any large donations here and there are under suspicion, right? A candidate that doesn't have any conflicts is still considered a suspect, because our system is so broken. We just expect everyone to be kind of falling down this rabbit hole. So I think it's really important that we spend some time looking at any of our local opportunities to either fight for public financing or ranked choice voting or more transparency or tighter campaign finance restrictions at the city level. Because the more normal we make that, the more it spreads. And once city after city does it, it just becomes normal. And that's kind of the Represent Us approach, is that if we normalize ethical, just elections at the city and state level, then our whole country will follow, and we will, by virtue of that, have saved our democracy. So my ask would be, I'll drop the link in, is just follow us and get involved. That would be my ask.
No, that's great. Well, thank you both so much. And I don't know if you can come off mute if people want to applaud, or if they want to use the reactions button. You can put happy or unhappy reactions, but a big thank you. And I thought it was a great discussion.
Thank you very much.
Great job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. That was very interesting.
Now with that, certainly Amy and Greg don't have to hang around. You can drop off, but everybody else, if we can ask them to stick around, because now we have a completely unbought election coming up next, which is the election of officers for the club. And so with that, I will hand
Thanks,
over.
everybody.
Thank you,
Thank
Amy.
you. It was nice to meet you, Greg.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Hey, honey.
Thank you. And so I will hand over here to Ruth Rollins, who will give her report as the head of the nominations, head of nominations, right? So we'll
Chairman of Nomination Committee.
There you go. That's the thank you, Ruth. Yes,
Okay.
all yours.
Yeah, a job I've held for like the last 6 years. Anyway, it is time for election of officers. And unfortunately, I didn't give a report last meeting, so you'd all know who was coming up. But I will tell you who has been nominated for each of the 4 positions, and then we'll go back and run through them individually one by one and let the candidates speak for a couple of minutes if they want to, and then hold the election. So the first position, starting, actually not the least important, maybe the most important, for secretary, Angela Hawkins has consented to run for re-election.
You said
Ruth.
Secretary Ruth when.
Oh, I'm sorry, you run, yes, you're treasurer. That's the important spot, the treasurer. Sorry, I was looking at Kip's name up there. Kip is running, is willing to run for re-election secretary. And then we have a vice president position. And this is a new candidate, Diane Mosley. And we'll have her address us in a little bit. And for president, our current vice president, John Laughlin, has stepped up. So with that, let's go back and we'll start running the election from the bottom of the list. Angela, do you have anything you'd like to say first before we start the election?
So for all of you who don't know, I was the treasurer during the last year. I've also been in charge of membership. I've been doing the best that I can, and I have been providing monthly financial reports to the executive board. My background is that I have 34 years of work experience at the University of California in progressively responsible positions and handled very high budgets and lots of income and expenses. So I have appropriate experience for continuing as the treasurer for the Point Loma Democratic Club, and I hope that you vote for me.
Okay. Thank you. Now I must call to see if there are any other nominations for treasurer from the floor. Any nominations for treasurer from the floor? Any other nominations for treasurer? Hearing none, the nominations are closed for treasurer. And I would move that we elect Angela Hawkins treasurer by consent.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor? Let's see. You can just say aye, or you can go into participants. And in participants, this one doesn't have what I'm used to.
Do you want us to check yes or no?
Yes, if you have it.
Yeah, I think Ruth also, I asked everybody to unmute, and if you like, everybody, as you say, as it's
Yeah,
unanimous
If
consent.
everybody is unmuted, yes, just say yes.
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 Okay,
Yes.
the opposition?
Yes.
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 All right.
No, that's me.
Angela has been elected by unanimous voice vote.
Yay.
Okay. And that brings us to our secretary. This time I've got it right. Kip Eisen. Kip, do you want to say a few words?
I do. Hi, everybody. I'm really excited to run for a second term as secretary and hope to have earned your trust this year. It's been a real honor to get to know the club better and support it with consistent and timely minutes. Last year, I organized a meeting about the arts for some of you who attended in May. And we got some additional exposure for the club with increasing engagement on Instagram. And an op-ed I wrote for the Voice of San Diego about our vote to support Monica Montgomery Stepp for City Council President. So my hope's to work together with more of you and hopefully meet some of you more as it becomes safe. And thank you for considering supporting me to continue as secretary.
I move that we elect Kip for a second term by unanimous consent.
I second.
Ruth, sorry, just to jump in, Ruth, you have to ask if there are any nominations from the floor, I think.
Oh, yes, that's right. Well, any nominations from the floor? Any nominations from the floor? Last call for nominations. Hearing none, now I'll ask you to vote. The nominations are closed for secretary. All in favor of electing Kip secretary?
Yes.
Say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
Yes.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, you are elected. Thank you, Kip, for standing with the club. All right. Now, for vice
Yay,
president.
Thank you.
No, I can't tell.
Those are both very good workers. And now we're going to ask from a newer club member. At least this is the first time she's come up on the nominating committee, Diane Mosley. Diane, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Diane. I've lived in San Diego since like 1985. I've pretty much never voted for anybody other than a Democrat my entire life. Moved to the Point Loma area in 2015, and then a couple of years ago became a member of the Democratic Club. I've always been a progressive, and I've wanted to make some impact in the local community with the Democratic Club. So I was very pleased and excited to run for vice president of the club. So I hope you will vote for me.
Hey. Well, are there any other nominations from the floor? Any nominations from the floor? Last call, nominations from the floor. The nominations are now closed. And I move we elect Diane Mosley to Vice President by acclamation.
Second.
Yes.
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 Okay, great.
Yay.
Welcome to the club executive board,
Thank you very
Diane.
much. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
And now for President, John Laughlin, who has been our Vice President. John, would you like to say anything?
I'll move it over to John.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth. Yeah, just to say hello to everybody. I'm delighted at the chance to be able to do a little bit more for the club. But years ago, Jerry Carmack made the dreadful mistake of dragging me to club meetings, and Nancy Witt, and then Ruth and Susan and everybody made sure I couldn't escape. I just stepped down this year from the director of clubs, working with all the clubs across the county. So I've seen how people do things lots of different ways, which is great. And I hope to bring some of that knowledge back here in what I think is a very important year as we educate ourselves on, like today, money and politics, on some of the issues before the district, and then the big decision that, you know, voters are going to have to make as to whether they want to recall a sitting council member. And the more general issue is that we've hit upon today, I think, is, you know, when Democrats have a great supermajority in the county and the city, how do we actually govern ourselves? So yeah, no, I'm delighted to be nominated. Thank you.
All right, thank you, John. I might say one thing. John mentioned he is the former director of clubs. He followed me into that position, and we had him elected as president of the women's club for 6 months or so he could take that position on. Anyway, we're extremely fortunate, but I must call.
Ruth, it was 1 month.
Nominations from the floor.
Ruth, John was president for 1 month of the women's
Was
club.
it only 1 month? Well,
Only
I knew it
1
was
month.
short. I knew it was short. See, even some of us Point Loma Dems can play politics. Anyway, any other nominations from the floor? Any nominations from the floor? Hearing none, the nominations for president of the Point Loma Democratic Club are closed. I move that we elect John Laughlin president by acclamation.
I second.
Yes.
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 All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, John. I'm going to keep you around for a while longer.
Congratulations.
Okay, and we now turn the gavel over to John, who will run the rest of the meeting. Thank you. Oh, we should also though say, I also want to say thank you to Marin for her 2 years of service. And I'm hope that she will stay around and continue to be an active part of the club. So thank you, Marin.
Where is she in?
Yeah, and I'll add to that as well, because Marin's driving back today and she's been connecting, dialing in to the meeting several times, but being on a cell phone, she's actually not on the meeting just right at the minute, but she'll probably call back in a minute.
Oh,
I'm just going to mute everybody again on the phone simply because there's some background noise. So I'll ask everybody to mute, but you still can unmute yourselves if you need to. But I'll
John,
just do it. Yes.
can I take one last comment to Gary Gartner? Our member Vera Payne's birthday, where she will be 98, is the 27th of March.
Thank you. Thanks, Ruth.
Okay.
Well, I will find out what we need to do to get a presidential letter to her, because I think that she would love that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Okay, so now I've muted everybody, so the background noise goes away. But as I say, if you need to unmute, you can. It's 5:30, so we do need to wrap up. Very briefly, though, are there any reports from Angela, from Treasurer?
Yes, very quickly, our current balance in our checking account is $9,954. Now that we have the new executive board for this upcoming year, we'll begin to discuss the community organizations that we will want to support this year, such as the Western Service Workers Association, and then also any political committees and other groups that are as appropriate for our club to be supporting. As of, I think now, because I believe we had 3 people while we were meeting renew their membership, and thank you all for doing that. We have 63 members who are renewals and new members for 2021. And again, if you have not renewed yet, will you please do that? We do want to get as many members of the club as possible. And in prior years, we've had more than 100 members. So I realize that this is a year in which people are still recovering from COVID and all the other activities, but hopefully you will renew your membership in the club. And a big shout out to all of you who have done sustaining memberships. I know that Les Williamson and Marilyn Gibbs and Mandy have recently renewed at the sustaining level. Thank you very much for doing that. And I thank you again for giving me the opportunity to do another year. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Angela. And that Kip, any secretary report?
Yes, I just want to bring up the minutes from our last January meeting where we discussed the endorsement for the recall campaign, and just want to bring this up to the floor to get a vote to approve, and also to say thank you. Really excited to serve for the next year.
That's great. Yeah, so I think we have everything there as Kip scrolls through. So do we have a motion to approve the minutes of the last general meeting?
This is Angela. I make a motion to approve the minutes of the January 24th general meeting.
That's great. And a second?
This is Les, I'll second.
Excellent. Thanks, Les. And then any discussion? Okay. Hearing no discussion, there's no objections, so the minutes are approved. That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. And then let's see, Merrin, I don't know if she made it back on. Okay, so I think we're good. I think we could go to announcements here in just a second. But just in my final minute, thank you everybody again. And just to say for our next meeting coming up on March the 28th, today we discuss money. Next meeting we'll have a presentation on short-term vacation rentals. And then in April, we'll have an explanation of the separation of powers between the City Council in San Diego and the Mayor's office, just to understand how that works, so we can inform ourselves on all these decisions because of other things that will be coming up here in the very near short-term future. So with that, are there any announcements that anybody would like to make? And if there are, if you want to raise your hand in the participants tab, which you can do, several people are doing, either from the reactions button or the participants button. And then, Dave Myers, if you want to go ahead first.
Thank you, John, and congratulations to all the new e-board. And it's great to see a lot of familiar faces that I haven't got to see in person in a while or have lunch with in a while. Good to see you, Miss Ruth. And what I'd like to bring to the attention of this club is an awareness of the jail deaths in San Diego County. 80% of jail deaths are from our Black and brown communities. San Diego County jails are known as having the highest rate of inmate mortality of the 6 largest county jails in the entire state of California. And of those 80% that have died in custody from our Black and brown communities, they have not been convicted of any crime. So essentially, jail has become a death sentence for them. And as a result, because of negligence on the part of the sheriff, millions and millions of dollars of taxpayers' dollars have been paid out instead of going to proactive preventative programs to incarceration. We really don't know what's going on inside jails right now. The County Law Enforcement Review Board, also known as CLRB, announced the formation of a subcommittee recently to look into the jail deaths. However, this is the same CLRB board that dismissed 22 jail death cases without investigating because they were overwhelmed with the number of jail death cases. And also have in mind that they don't have the expertise nor the staff to do any type of in-depth investigation into the type of jail investigations that we need. Right now, what I'm asking is for this club to participate in a resolution sent to our local or our state representatives, asking them to conduct a state audit. A state audit similar to the hepatitis A outbreak here in San Diego that our new mayor Todd Gloria asked for, but specifically to what is occurring in our jail system and what are the fixes. And I know Lori is helping out with Saldana, and there's some stuff put in the chat. I'm also going to put some relevant articles. And I would ask that, you know, as a community, we don't want to be known as the town in which we are seeing the highest rate of inmate mortality deaths anywhere in the state of California, and we could do better. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Dave. This is, a very serious subject that's been dragging on for far too long. Thank you for the information. Go ahead and put stuff in the chat. And what we'll do following this meeting is we'll email all that out to everybody, and then we'll be in a position to be able to take a vote on that at next month's meeting. So that's great. Thank you, Dave. So let's see. Next, we have Sonara, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. So you just showed that whole presentation on corporate money. I recommend to both of those speakers. Amy's doing some great work here locally. I'm really excited about having the push for ranked choice elections here in San Diego. But at the end of the day, the only way we are going to stop corporations from making unlimited donations to Independent Expenditures Committee to spend as much money as they want on any race at the local, state, or federal level is to overturn Citizens United. And that's going to take a constitutional amendment. And there are two of them right now that have been proposed in Congress. So I've started a local working group to lobby our Congress members here in San Diego County to ask them to sign on to support these constitutional amendments, because yes, it may seem impossible to pass a constitutional amendment, but it's what needs to be done. So, you know, I was part of the marijuana legalization effort before this. Sometimes you can make the impossible possible. And we need to hit that 3%, as Amy said. So we're having a local meeting of the San Diego Working Group to overturn Citizens United and end corporate personhood. Just a working group. Someone can give it a better name, please. This Friday, March 5th at 4:30 p.m. If anyone would like to join, I'm putting in the chat the invite. And so if you'd like to sign up, we'd love to have you there. The more constituents we have, each asking each of our congressional representatives, the better. So, you know, here in Point Loma and Ocean Beach, our congressional representative is Scott Peters. I'm going to be participating in that. Marion has signed up as well, and we'd love to have more of you because we have to show our congressional representatives that this is important, that this is actually a priority, because they're having a lot of things thrown at them right now. It may not even be that they don't want to support it. It may simply be that it isn't made a priority to them. So let's make it a priority. And also, as Amy said, please call your representatives to support HR1, super important. So yeah, please sign up this Friday, 4:30 p.m., Friday, March 5th via Zoom. And I put the information in the chat. Okay, thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Sonara. And then Angela, you're next.
Yes, so as you know, we as a club voted to support the Recall Gen effort at our last meeting. And although what we're doing over the next this meeting and the next two is to provide you with more information that will presumably help you decide whether or not you want to sign the petition that is now circulating. So officially they are now circulating the petitions. Some of us in the club have those petitions, and we are willing to come to your house to have you sign the petition so that you don't have to try to find somebody who's doing it at the grocery store. And so we will provide that information to you if you are interested, where you can email one of us, and we will do it in a safe, COVID appropriate way to allow you to sign in front of us as we're collecting the signatures. So just wanted to let you know, and more information on that will come forth.
That's great. Thanks, Angela. And then next we have Nicole.
I just wanted to, I missed the last meeting, and I'd love to read the minutes, particularly about what was said about the Recall Jen campaign. I was surprised that it was discussed. I would have attended the meeting and would love to read the minutes, because was delighted to hear you'd voted to support it. Where can I access the minutes?
Yeah, I'll send those out in the notes from this meeting. Then I'll put a link in there to the minutes where you can get all the minutes for the meetings.
Okay, yep. Great, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome. That's great. So next up we have Michelle Krug. And Michelle, I'll send you a message to unmute. So yeah, Michelle, you're still on mute, so I'll send that again. There you go. You're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you, John. I just wanted to make a quick announcement about the California Teachers Association is having a virtual rally on Wednesday, March 10th at 4:30 p.m. I'll get you the link. I don't know if anybody who's in there may already have gotten it, but I'll make sure that you get it, John, and if that could be passed out. It's virtual by Zoom. It's at 4:30. It'll be less than an hour. It's basically talking to teachers at 4 different charter schools that have been unionized about what their experience has been. These are teachers that have been unionized, voted to become union a year to 2 years ago, but still have not been able to get their first contract through that leadership. So one of them is in San Diego, that's Gompers. Then there's one in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Sacramento. But it's just giving people the idea of what is going on with the teachers. And then we will be doing a town hall about Gompers coming up shortly. Thank you.
That's great, Michelle. And you said that was Wednesday, March 10th?
Wednesday, March 10th at 4:30 p.m.
Okay, great. Yeah, and if you shoot me the note, I'll call you afterwards and we can put that in the notes that we send out from the meeting.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next up, we have Susan.
Yes, so everybody has put things and links in the chat. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands how to save the chat so you can access it later. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and you open up the icon that says chat, if you see at the bottom of the chat square that opens up, at the bottom on the right, there's a rectangle, a square, and it has 3 dots in it. If you click on those 3 dots, a window, a thing opens up, and it says Save Chat, and that's what you click on to save the chat. And then when you close your Zoom that you have been participating in, you will see immediately on your screen the link to the file where that chat has been saved. That's it. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Susan. That's good. That's good. And Gary, you're next.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Susan. I've never known how to do it. Everyone says you can. Now I finally understand it. How, so thank you. I just wanted to make a comment that as we face the recall of Jen Campbell, who we all know, I just want to say that I think it's really important that we respect each other's views. You know, there's good friends of mine like Ruth and probably Doug Case and others that are going to be opposed to the recall. And I will respectfully, you know, respect their opinion, but I won't personalize it. I respect their opinion and why. But we need to respect each other, because lately I have gotten word from people that because, you know, how can I, as a gay man who's Jewish and older and whatever, oppose one of our own? And I told them it's not about identity. And then I've been accused that it's privileged white people that are trying to get rid of Jen Campbell. Well, that's false too, because Tasha Williamson and all kinds of Black and brown leaders are for the recall. It's about her job, which she did, in my view. So all I want to say is, as we face this, let's just be respectful of each other, because we may disagree this time, we may agree, but then we'll work together in the future. And I think that's really important as we face this recall. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gary, for saying that. I think that is a very important point. I mean, longtime club members can remember we've had disagreements on candidates before, and it does create kind of division, but then ultimately we're all trying to chase the same goals, even if we have slightly different ways of going about them. And I think the broader discussion here of how electeds are held accountable in a world where we know political and economic interests take precedence is a very important discussion. And with that, I want to thank again, the speakers that we had today. We'll send out notes from this meeting. Please do get involved. And with that, I will say have a great evening. And if you want to hang around or they want to talk about anything, that's fine. We won't cut the Zoom off straight away. But what I will do, if I can get it to work here, is I will play some music just to guide us out, because it's always happier to end a meeting with some music playing.
And one thing too, John, those of you who feel strongly about the recall, don't just sign the petition. There are petitions that have like 4 signature spaces on it, so you don't have to have that many, or there's ones with 22 or 23 spots for signatures. Get a petition and help to get the signatures, because otherwise the recall will not be on the ballot. So thanks.
Very true. So with that, thank you everyone, and have a great evening.
John, can you hear me?
Yeah, if you wait just a little, Michelle, just let the song play out, and then